What is up, you guys? We are back at it again with another video, and I'm so excited for this one because we are finally going into the Lyran story. Now, I've always wanted to talk about this because it's not just my heritage. If you're aware of Lyra, Lyra is actually labeled as the civilization of civilizations, or the mother civilization, because this is where all humanoid species actually originate from. So all humanoid species in the galaxy originate from Lyra and all have a connection to Lyra. Almost all of my incarnations have been as a Lyran. When I learned that I was basically a pure Lyran, I was like, whoa, and I was told this by all these readers. This is before I got past life memories and all that. And I was like, whoa, really? Like, what does that even mean? But I didn't even know what Lyrans were. And as soon as I was told I was a Lyran years ago, I started crying. I didn't even know what Lyra was or anything. And then I started learning about it. And then when I started getting past life memories, then stuff started changing. Then I realized I was a royal from Lyra. I was part of the royal family of this planet called Avalon in Lyra. And my memories there go really deep and it's very emotional. And I will talk about that in another video. But for now, we're going to talk about generally the Lyran story. And of course, later on, we're going to go into, more extraterrestrials like the ones you see on my screen right now. This website is, we're going to use these two websites, okay? Just so you guys know, we're going to use Starseed 584, which is amazing, okay? The art is beautiful. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of insight on them, but it's beautiful. And we're going to use Debbie Solaris and her website. It is amazing. Of course, we can't get fully accurate. Like Debbie Solaris's website is 87% accurate. I say it's not fully accurate because I have memories from Lyra, and I remember what it was like there, and I remember the invasion, and I remember everything generally from Lyra. That's why I want to make a website. So most people know Lyrans as the felines and, lion beings. Let's start at the beginning of galactic history, okay, when there was no beings in the galaxy just yet. Now, there's these beings, or spirits I should called co-creators. These co-creator spirits invited Lyran beings, or we should say feline beings, into this galaxy, and they were invited here to start new life and to create new life in this galaxy. So they were invited in as creators to create new life, and they chose Lyra. These feline beings are etherical, basically fifth dimensional and higher, so they don't have a physical essence. So they're etherical beings that were invited into this galaxy, basically start a new journey for new life in this galaxy. The first two races that were created, we could say, in the Lyran system were the felines and the avian beings. They were etherical form, of course. So they had to go through the stage of evolving a physical body, okay, in which to reside on the planet. After many millions of years, they evolved the lion and other felines and began incarnating in these forms. Now, with the DNA from the ape-like mammals that they created, remember, they're master geneticists. So at this point, they created ape-like mammals, and the felines were able to take on a more human-like body and retain still most of their characteristics and features. And this is what created the genetic line of the royal line of Avion. Now, my people were the genetic royal line of Avalon, but we're going to get more into that after. So the etherical felines would continue to take turns incarnating to provide not only DNA upgrading, but teaching and training in higher dimensional principles, lest their planet-bound brothers and sisters get stuck in the non-sentient animal incarnation cycle. They're trying to evolve this body here, but they have to start as lion. Actually, let's go here. So they had to start out as animals, and they evolved in, and they didn't want to get stuck in the animalistic evolutionary process. So they took turns, each going in and incarnating until they got this. Here we go. They're master geneticists, and they began helping to develop life forms of various kinds for planets and stars in the universe. Now, as you see here, a feline specialty was being master geneticists. It is during this stage in their development that the felines would turn their attention to that bipedal mammal they owed so much to and began a program of genetic crossing and upgrading that would give them a soul and in the process create a new species that would become known as humans. Now we're at the human area when the felines now evolved physical bodies. They wanted to create a life form that was basically like native to this galaxy, because remember, felines aren't necessarily native to this galaxy and they're invited here to create life. So they created humans. There was many different subcategories, okay, like red-headed and platinum blonde strains and all of that, which is interesting because I was just talking to my mentor about our lifetimes in Lyra, and she said she remembered the red-headed children that she used to take care of in Lyra. So that's kind of crazy right there. A little side note for y'all. So the first ones we have were the white Nordic race, which was, again, there's more to it, but we're taking the short story here, okay? So there were the white Nordic Lyran race, which looked like this, and there were the vegans, which we're gonna kind of skip the vegans for now because that's a whole nother topic and a longer story, but they basically look like this, like the Hindu gods that the Hindus depicted as they were Lyran too. Now let's go to Starseed 584 and go to the Lyrans. This is typically what the Lyrans look like. And I remember this, they kind of look like Targaryens. And that's a whole nother story too that we're not going to get into because Targaryens are kind of like they were depicting the Lyrans. But that's a whole nother story, okay? These are the original Lyrans that the felines now created. So these are the native Lyrans, okay? And now remember, they've been living this way for millions of years. So millions of years of being in this star system and living this way. And of course, now there's other beings in the galaxy now because they've spread out. So now this is where you get all the other beings that you see here. Pleiadians, which are cousins, really close cousins of the Lyrans. Then we have the Syrians, the Arcturians. They all stem from the original Lyrans, what some people call old Lyran. Now it says here as well, created in this universe by the felines. They are primarily a peaceful spiritual people, but are very childish. Being so childish and naive led them to trust the Draconians in the early stages of their conquest. Now let's look at the Draconians or the Reptilians, which also originally came from another universe after the avian and feline races were already developing here for billions of years. The reptilian races established themselves in the Draco and Orion constellation regions here in the galaxy and then set out to conquer other worlds. Now let's get into what actually happened in Lyra. She talks about how this was a very difficult session for her to make, and when I was first getting these memories, it was extremely painful, and I'm gonna talk about this soon and how I dealt with it and how talking with other Lyrans and their memories that they got as well, how they handled it. So these beings originally came from another universe as well, like the felines, and from my understanding, they may have actually been invited in as well as like a giant experiment by co-creators. The co-creators decided to start the great experiment of the descent into physicality in a small constellation that is located right next to a much bigger constellation, Draco, that contained dark service to self reptilian beings now known as the Draconians. And they created such massive destruction of such large magnitude in that other universe that they were removed and basically put into this universe. And from my understanding, like up here, like they're saying like what we understand is that they were brought in, and this is what the Galactic Federation always is telling me now about this. Now, the Galactic Federation was telling me about this before I made this video. They were saying, make sure you tell everybody that they were actually invited in as well. So they started out as lizards and they evolved, and this is where they got their culture and where they are now. So this is what they look like at the present moment. If you guys want to get more into these extraterrestrial races and know about them, we'll go into that if you want to, which you guys probably gonna want to. But let's just talk about what happened in Lyra. They could be considered forces of darkness in that they raid realities out of conquest and control systems of consciousness for the sake of power and service the self. They are strongly polarized along the separative principle of the universe, and they do not follow the non-interventional guidelines of allowing civilizations to develop along their own lines. The Galactic Federation sees it illegal to go against another being's free will and control their evolution. But these beings, they see it as illegal to allow beings to have free will and evolve on their own. Interesting. It's literally yin and yang, and you're gonna start seeing this now, how the Lyrans and the Draconians are literally yin and yang, light and dark. And this was basically the great experiment that these co-creators wanted to see happen. So this galaxy was like a giant experiment. Isn't that real cool? They seek conquest and will use whatever level of power and violence is needed to achieve their goals of dominion. They came to own and control different portals of space and corridors of time, which allowed them to raid different realities and structures of consciousness called planets. As is true of all those of negative polarity, they were never satisfied with all that they have come under control with and spread out throughout the galaxy like a cancer. Now, let's talk about when light and dark finally met. Remember, Lyrans are a very peaceful civilization. They're agricultural based. Yes, they had space travel and technology, and they were geneticists and all of this, but they were light beings, physical light beings. So they knew nothing but light. And like it says here, they were very childlike because they were so peaceful and so playful. And that's what a lot of people know Lyrans for now, is being very playful still to this day. So any Lyrans you know, they're probably still very playful. So now at this point, the Draconians are migrating around the galaxy to find new areas to live. And whatever they needed, they would just take it and move on. So when they got to Lyra, they discovered several solar systems with incredible planets that had water and lush vegetation, and they immediately wanted to control it. Now, when they approached the Lyrans were extremely suspicious of the reptilians because the Siakar element of the race was very aggressive. I'll just say a little bit of my memories because this is saved for another video. I remember at this time when they first came, we knew before, like we kept hearing that there's movement in the Draco star system, that there's beings coming to visit us or something. I remember that. And then when they landed, their energy was so dark. It was like, but we never really experienced energy like that, but it was extremely dark and we knew there wasn't something right, and they were extremely aggressive. At that time, I kept telling my father, which was king, I said, listen, we shouldn't trust these people. And I was princess at the time. And I said, Dad, we shouldn't trust these people because look at them. Like, I don't trust them. And there was a large part of my planet, at least, which was Avalon, that did not trust the Draconians. They were kind of meshing with our civilization because we wanted to get to know them. So we were meshing with them. And at this point, half of the civilization was not trusting them and half were. But my dad only saw the light in them again, and he was being deceived. Long story short, he was being deceived by them, but he kept believing that we could help them become lighter, that we could basically transform them into lighter beings, which is exactly why what happened. Some say that there was a miscommunication or misunderstanding between the Draconians and Lyran humans that caused the wars. But my understanding, which is Debbie Solaris talking right now, is that they intended to deceive the Lyrans the whole time with the offer of some sort of treaty in exchange for resources and basically all the stuff that the Lyrans had in return for higher level advanced technology from the Draconians. The Draconians knew that the Lyrans were a younger race compared to them anyways, because the Draco have had space travel and been around for 4 billion years. And at this time, the Lyran humans were much younger, only like, few million years old? So that sounds like a lot, but compared to 4 billion, makes sense, right? So basically they offered the Lyrans a deal for technology in return for the resources that they had on the planet. And I remember we agreed, but we didn't. We said, okay, we will do this if we get to know each other first. Oh, it says right here, the Lyrans, although very eager to attain technology from the Draconians, they wanted to know more about the Draconians first before they make a treaty. They allowed the Draconians to explore the planets. And I remember this. The Draco said, can we explore? And my dad, which was King, said, sure. And I remember they would scope out, and they would always do a lot of weird stuff. Like sometimes people would go missing, or civilians would report that a draconian being said this to them and did that to them. And of course we wanted to get to know them, so we didn't want conflict at all, which we never knew of. We were just like, we want peace, so let's just get to know them first more, and then we'll handle everything later. So the Draconians took this opportunity to scope out all of the planets and subsequently ambushed and annihilated several of the 14 planets in the Lyran system. And as the Lyrans were a very peaceful race and never knew war, violence, or deception, they were defenseless. Now, it says here that they did not have weapons, but we did. We had things that could serve as weapons or defense. Mainly, it was defense things from our past when we were first getting to know each other and come together as a civilization. So we had defense weapons, but not weapons in terms of things to actually fight, like swords, guns, and stuff like that. It was more just shields and escape routes and stuff like that, like very passive aggressive weaponry. The planets Bila, Tekka, Merc, Avion, and Avalon were destroyed, and possibly others. Over 50 million Lyran humans were slaughtered. And at this point in history, this is when the Draconians began to look at humans as a food source and as slaves. And I have a lot of past life memories as a sex slave, and those were the hardest. I'll say those were really the hardest. I spent a whole week not wanting to talk to people and just being in my room because it was so hard. During the wars, the reptilians had their first taste of human flesh, and they liked it. And they also used the Lyran prisoners as sex slaves and breeding purposes. This is how old the struggle is between the reptilian and human races. What resulted from the Lyra Draconian Wars was the biggest catastrophic event that has ever occurred in this galaxy and quite possibly the entire universe. And all beings in the galaxy know this story. It's almost like the World War I of the galaxy, like where things all began. It was the attack by the Draconians that forced the Lyrans to evacuate their survivors from their planets, migrate out of that system, and spread out into the galaxy. It also forced them to develop weapons. As a general rule, most of the Lyran refugees ended up settling in the Pleiades and Andromedan systems, and the majority of the humans from the Vega system ended up in Sirius and Orion. Now, a bunch of my star family that I know now are Sirian beings and Orion beings. Also, my galactic mother and some other of my star family are Pleiadian. Now, Pleiadians are very close cousins of the Lyrans. We're going to talk about that why after, because they went to the Pleiades to try and create basically another Lyra, and they tried to create that, and that's a whole nother video. When the wars happened, I went to Andromeda to learn how to fight, and I got all this training from these basically like elite warriors in Andromeda. When I would go to readers, this is before I knew much about Lyra, they would say, you went to Andromeda and you're going to get to go back as you've always wanted to. And it felt so right. I was like, yes, because I have this huge respect for Andromeda and I never knew why. And then when I started getting memories, I realized I was trained in Andromeda and I have high respect for Andromeda because of how they helped me to then go to war. So they were on their ships fleeing the reptilian invasion, growing their own food on their craft and looking for water as a consequence. And the human races became very adaptable and creative. Now, at this point, the Draconian races were still really hunting down the Lyrans, and they realized that the Lyrans needed water. So they positioned themselves anywhere in the galaxy where they knew the Lyrans were going to go to get water, and they would basically plant large ships there and prevent the Lyrans from getting water or attack them when they were going to get it. And this was literally the way that the Draconians would force the humans out of the galaxy. They wanted Lyrans completely out, and they wanted to use them as slaves, as they've done in their other universes. Now, like it says on this website, there's not very much known about the Andromedans. And this is why I also want to talk about the Andromedans, because my memory of them is so beautiful. There's no other beings anywhere that I know of in the universe like Andromedans. And they taught me how to become the warrior that I was. My family did not want me fighting in the Lyran wars, but again, I was the princess of Lyra, and it was my duty to protect the people. And I felt like it was also my fault that the Draconians invaded. And I felt like it was my fault that I didn't try and stop them or to get my father to see. So at the end, I had to fight. Once Lyra was destroyed, then we had to go find new places to live and new homes. The Draconians were hunting down all the Lyrans they could still, and they were trying to basically eradicate them all, and especially the Lyran royals, which it says here somewhere. They were hunting them down. And me, I was like, you know what? They want Lyra, they're going to get Lyra. And during the wars, I fought them as much as I could. And then when it was destroyed, then I was hunting them down. So it was my sole mission to hunt down the Draconians that destroyed my home world. And I wanted to get rid of all of them from this galaxy as they invaded this galaxy and our planet and our home world. And they wanted nothing but destruction. I wanted revenge. I was very revengeful. I wanted to make sure that what happened to my world happened nowhere else. And this is where I kept hearing the phrase never again. And you'll hear a lot of Lyrans, especially in my soul family, that say the words never again all the time, because that is the quote that we lived by when Lyra was destroyed. Now Lyrans are very thriving beings, and they're very advanced, and they're very much powerful. The war between humans and reptilians and Lyrans, Draconians, basically all these beings against the dark forces is still happening to this day. Not as much as before in galactic history, but it is still happening to this day and happening on this planet, which is why a lot of us are here on Earth for this mission. And let's end it here. This is kind of a long video, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is basically Lyra. This is what Lyra is in the Lyra Draconian Wars and really what happened. The next video, I will get into my past life memories from Lyra, and we'll dig into what the civilization looked like, what my lives looked like. There's so much we could get into that I want people to know of. Endless amount of videos we can make on this. So if you guys want to know more about galactic history and maybe even your starseed heritage, let me know in the comments, leave a little like. So I love you guys, and I will see you real soon. Peace out. Bye.